The sun beat down on the concrete like it was punishing us for being late. My daughter Emily clutched the straps of her pink life vest, her eyes shining with the same excitement she'd carried all week. It was her first summer since therapy had helped her legs move a little better, and all she wanted was to swim in that pool like every other kid. But just as we rolled her wheelchair toward the gate, that voice cut through the air, sharp, entitled, unmistakably Karen. "Sorry," she said, blocking the entrance with her clipboard like it was a badge of power. "The HOA poll closed at 12. It's policy." I glanced at my watch, 12:05 p.m. 5 minutes. My chest tightened. "Come on, Karen," I said, forcing calm. "She's been waiting all month. We're just a few minutes late." Karen's sunglasses slid down her nose, revealing that smirk she always wore when she felt in control. "Rules are rules," she said, shrugging. "We can't make exceptions every time." She emphasized the word like a knife twist, her gaze flicking down at Emily's braces. My daughter's smile faltered. I felt her small hand tremble against mine. Around us, the sound of children laughing in the water stung worse than the sun. I could smell chlorine and sunscreen, a world just out of reach. "Please," Emily whispered, voice breaking. "I just want to swim." But Karen only tilted her head. "Try again next summer," she said coldly, turning the lock with a metallic click that echoed in my chest. That sound, that single, heartless click, was the moment something inside me snapped. Our neighborhood always looked perfect on the outside: white fences, trimmed lawns, and neighbors who waved just long enough to seem friendly. But behind that picture-perfect calm, there were people like Karen who treated the HOA like a throne. I'd moved here for peace, for a place where my daughter Emily could grow up safe, surrounded by other kids instead of pitying stares. She was 8, brave, and beautiful in ways that broke and rebuilt my heart every day. Cerebral palsy had slowed her body, but not her spirit. Every morning she'd stare out her window at the blue shimmer of the community pool across the cul-de-sac. "One day, I'm gonna swim like the dolphins," she'd tell me, wiggling her fingers in the air like fins. I'd smile and say, "Then we better get you those water wings ready." That pool wasn't just water to her, it was freedom. It was the one place she could forget the wheels beneath her and just be a kid. Our small house sat at the edge of Maplewood Estates, one of those developments that looked like it was designed to impress realtors more than families. Every house had matching shutters. Every mailbox was painted HOA-approved gray. Even the grass length had rules. I'd worked extra shifts to afford our place, but it was worth it for Emily's therapy center nearby and the accessible parks. The HOA, though, had always been a shadow looming over that happiness: endless fines, meeting notices, and those subtle warnings written in friendly emails. Karen Turner, the self-elected queen of the association, ruled with a smile that never reached her eyes. She had a voice that could turn sugar sour, and she loved quoting policy like it was scripture. I tried to keep my head down, pay the dues, and not stir trouble. Summer was everything to Emily. The pool was opening after months of being closed for repairs, and she'd circled the date on the fridge calendar with pink marker. We'd practiced with her therapist so she could ease into the shallow end safely. I'd even bought her a new swimsuit, yellow with tiny white daisies that matched the hair clips she loved. The night before pool registration, she couldn't sleep. "What if they say no?" she whispered from her bed. "They won't," I promised, brushing her hair from her forehead. "You're part of this neighborhood too." I believed it when I said it. I wanted to believe it. The next morning smelled of cut grass and sunscreen. Families lined up at the HOA office to register their kids, chatting about swim schedules and summer barbecues. Emily held my hand tight, smiling up at me. "This is the best day ever," she said. And for a moment, it was. I didn't notice Karen's car pulling up beside us, the black SUV with its custom vanity plate, Rule 1ST. I didn't see her sharp eyes measuring us from behind her sunglasses. If I had, maybe I'd have known what was coming. Maybe I'd have realized that in Maplewood Estates, kindness had an expiration time, and Karen Turner was the one who decided when it ran out. Karen Turner was the kind of neighbor who made you second-guess every smile. She appeared that morning with her clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon of authority, her bright yellow blouse glowing against the white of the pool gate. Her perfume arrived before she did, sharp, expensive, and overwhelming. "Morning," she said sweetly, but her tone carried that edge that always meant you're already doing something wrong. "You must be Emily's mom. I've seen your emails about accessibility concerns." Her lips barely curled around the last words. I nodded, cautiously hopeful. "Yes. We just wanted to make sure she could use the pool safely." "The ramp still," she interrupted with a little laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "Oh, I'm aware of your messages. You're quite persistent." She said it like a flaw, not a compliment. Behind her, 2 board members nodded along, the same 2 men who never seemed to have opinions until Karen gave them one. She flipped through her papers dramatically. "You know, we have to be fair to everyone. It's not always easy when people expect special treatment." I caught the look she gave toward Emily's wheelchair, quick but cutting. I felt the sting of it, like a slap dressed up as politeness. "All we want is what's fair," I said quietly. Karen smiled wider. "Of course. Fairness is what keeps a community beautiful. Rules exist for a reason, after all." She said it like scripture, a sermon from her HOA gospel. That was how she worked, never openly cruel, never yelling. Just little needles hidden in her sentences. The next day, I found a notice taped to our door, reminder: all residents must maintain their yards to HOA standards. The grass had grown maybe an inch, but the timing wasn't coincidence. A week later, another message: vehicles with visible rust may face citations. My old van wasn't rusty, it was just used. But Karen didn't care about facts, only appearances. Every interaction was a reminder that she could make life harder if she wanted to. Still, I tried to stay civil. I even waved when I saw her at the mailbox one morning. She smiled that same hollow smile and said, "Just remember, deadlines are deadlines." I'd hate for anyone to be disqualified. The way she lingered on that last word made my stomach twist. I didn't know yet what she meant, but I felt the warning. Karen didn't shout her power, she whispered it, and somehow that was worse. It started small, just little inconveniences that didn't seem worth fighting at first. The pool's new ramp that the HOA promised to fix before summer was suddenly delayed again. Waiting on contractor approval, Karen said with her usual fake sympathy. Weeks passed. Then came the parking notices. My van, which I used to transport Emily's wheelchair, was suddenly labeled a non-compliant vehicle because it had a rear lift. "It's about aesthetics," Karen told me one afternoon, smiling tight. "We're maintaining neighborhood standards." That phrase, neighborhood standards, became her favorite weapon. Every time I opened my email, there was another notice waiting: please remove visible medical equipment from porches. Please limit noise from therapy sessions. One even said, please ensure your child refrains from bringing non-licensed aids to common areas. It felt like death by paperwork. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was targeting us. At first, I tried to reason with her. I sent polite messages, offered to volunteer for HOA events, even baked cookies for the next meeting. But kindness only fueled her ego. "Oh, you're so passionate," she'd say, patting my arm like I was a child. But passion doesn't override policy. I started noticing how other parents avoided eye contact when I spoke at meetings. Some of them agreed with me privately, but no one dared speak up. Karen ran this place like a suburban monarchy, and people had learned that silence was safer than defiance. Then one morning, I found a letter slipped under our door, no name, no signature. It read, Maybe your daughter would be happier somewhere more suited to her needs. My hands shook as I read it. Emily was in the kitchen, humming to herself, unaware that someone in our own neighborhood wanted her gone. That night, as she fell asleep holding her stuffed dolphin, I sat in the dark and cried. Not out of fear, but fury. The final straw came 2 days before pool registration. I got an HOA email marked urgent. The annual poll for summer participation will close at 12 p.m. sharp. Late entries will not be accepted for any reason. Normally, polls stayed open all day. It was deliberate. I replied immediately, asking for an extension because Emily's therapy session ran until noon. No response. I followed up twice more, nothing. When I saw Karen later that evening walking her dog past our house, she didn't even glance at me. Just smiled that knowing smile and said, "Make sure you're on time this year. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings." My stomach dropped. I realized then this wasn't just about rules anymore. Karen wanted control, complete, humiliating control. And she was about to prove she had it. The sun that day didn't just shine, it burned, heavy and unrelenting, turning every surface of Maplewood Estates into a mirror of heat. I remember the way the metal of Emily's wheelchair seared my palms as I pushed her up the path toward the pool. She was wearing her new yellow swimsuit with the little white daisies, the one she'd picked out weeks ago. "Do you think they'll let me go down the ramp by myself this time?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "Of course," I said, smiling through the knot forming in my stomach. But the moment I saw Karen standing by the gate, arms crossed, clipboard clutched tight like a judge's gavel, I knew something was wrong. Her lips curled into that familiar smile, the kind that pretends to be polite but hides poison underneath. "Registration's closed," she announced before I could even open my mouth. The poll ended at noon. Her tone was rehearsed, crisp, and cruelly casual. I froze, looking down at my phone. 12:05 p.m. "Karen, come on," I said, trying to steady my voice. "It's 5 minutes." She's been looking forward to this for months. Emily's small hand gripped mine, her eyes scanning the kids already splashing in the pool behind the fence. "Please," she whispered. "I can still make it." But Karen only tilted her head, pretending to check her clipboard. "I'm sorry," she said, "not sorry at all. Rules are rules. If I make one exception, I'll have to make them for everyone." She glanced down at Emily's wheelchair, her gaze lingering just a little too long. "And besides, it's not like it's safe for everyone anyway." My heart hammered. "You're discriminating against her," I said flatly. Karen gasped, feigning offense. "Oh, don't be dramatic. This is about procedure, not whatever you're implying." Behind her, a couple of HOA members shifted awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. One of them whispered something to her, but she ignored him. Emily's eyes began to water. "Mom," she said softly, "it's okay." But it wasn't okay. Not when every laugh from the kids behind the gate sounded like a reminder that she wasn't allowed to belong. Not when the smell of chlorine and sunscreen hung in the air like a cruel invitation we couldn't accept. I felt something inside me snap, quietly at first, like a thread pulled too tight. "You knew I had work until noon," I said. "You planned this." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You scheduled the vote, changed the closing time, ignored my messages, because you didn't want her here." My voice shook, but not from fear. From rage. Karen stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You should be careful with those kinds of accusations," she whispered, eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't want the HOA to review your compliance record." That was the moment it shifted, from injustice to war. I took a long, hard look at her smug face and said, "This isn't over." Then I turned Emily's chair around and pushed her back toward the car. She didn't cry out loud, just wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. The wheels clicked rhythmically over the pavement, soft, defeated sounds that burned deeper than any scream. As we reached the car, she whispered, "I just wanted to feel normal, Mom." And that broke me. I looked back at the gate where Karen stood triumphantly, clipboard pressed to her chest, laughing with another board member. That's when I swore to myself, she was going to regret every single second of that 5-minute rule. That night, the house felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves had absorbed our humiliation. Emily barely spoke during dinner, she just pushed her peas around her plate, her eyes distant. I tried to keep my voice steady, telling her everything would be okay, but even I didn't believe it. When she finally went to bed, I stood by her doorway for a long time, watching the faint glow of her dolphin nightlight reflect off her wheelchair. Her tiny hand rested on the pillow, limp and tired, as if she'd run a marathon she never got to start. The sound of sprinklers outside filled the silence, but instead of comfort, it made me angry at this perfect neighborhood pretending to be good while it quietly crushed us beneath its rules. I sat in the living room long after midnight, replaying every second at that pool gate. Karen's smirk. The kids' laughter echoing in the background. The metallic click of that lock closing. Each sound looped in my head like a punishment. I thought about the things I didn't say, the fight I should have made right there, the way I froze when she used rules like a weapon. Maybe I should have shouted. Maybe I should have called someone. But instead, I let Karen win in front of my daughter. That thought hit hardest. The shame burned deeper than the anger. I poured a glass of water but couldn't swallow. My throat felt tight, my chest heavy. When I finally crawled into bed, the ceiling fan hummed like a heartbeat I couldn't calm. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, the way her hope cracked and fell away like glass. Around 3 a.m., I got up and stood by the window, staring at the dark silhouette of the pool 2 streets over. The water shimmered faintly under the moonlight, perfect and untouched. My reflection in the glass looked hollow, exhausted, but beneath it, something new had started to form, a quiet, cold kind of resolve. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this couldn't be the end. Karen thought she'd closed the door on us. What she didn't realize was that she'd just opened another one, the kind that leads straight to a reckoning. The next morning, I woke up with a different kind of heaviness, not sadness, but a quiet, calculated anger. My first instinct was to check my emails again, the same ones I'd sent Karen days before. Every word felt sharper now, every no reply heavier with intent. I opened the HOA website to see if the voting times were ever officially posted. Nothing. No timestamp, no update, just a vague note saying, "Poll will close promptly." That wasn't procedure. I'd read the rules before. The HOA was required to give a full 24-hour window for participation. Karen hadn't just been cruel, she'd broken her own regulations to keep Emily out. My heart started to pound. I opened the community chat logs, scrolling through messages from the last week. Buried between pool cleaning reminders and barbecue plans, I saw it, a text from Karen, sent privately to another board member the night before the vote. "Keep it short tomorrow. We don't need everyone showing up. You know who I mean." I froze. The words blurred for a second as anger surged through me like electricity. She had targeted us, not just us, but anyone she didn't consider part of her picture-perfect neighborhood. I started digging deeper. The HOA's digital meeting minutes were public records, and in those PDFs, I found something else. The accessibility modification I'd requested last year, the pool ramp fix, had been approved by the county 6 months ago. But Karen had filed a temporary hold claiming budget constraints. That hold had her signature all over it. I checked the attached maintenance report. The ramp repairs were fully funded, money had been allocated, yet somehow, not a dollar was spent. She'd delayed it intentionally. That discovery flipped a switch inside me. I wasn't helpless anymore, I had proof. Proof that Karen wasn't just following rules, she was twisting them. I saved every document, every email, every timestamp into a single folder named HOA Truth. The more I found, the more the anger turned to focus. For the first time in months, I felt steady. I remembered what Emily had said after that awful day at the pool: I just wanted to feel normal. That sentence echoed as I scrolled through Karen's old posts about keeping standards high and protecting community values. I realized something simple but powerful: people like Karen rely on silence. They count on the good ones giving up. I wasn't giving up. I printed the evidence, highlighted every line, and tucked it neatly into a file. My hands didn't shake this time. "Okay, Karen," I whispered to myself, staring at her smug photo on the HOA page. "You like rules? Let's see how you handle the real ones." For the next several days, my life turned into an investigation. Every free moment between work and Emily's therapy was spent in front of my laptop, piecing together a puzzle Karen didn't even know she'd left behind. I started with the HOA bylaws, 43 pages of dry legal jargon I'd never paid much attention to before. But this time, I read every line like my daughter's happiness depended on it. And in a way, it did. I highlighted sections about equal participation rights, reasonable accommodation, and voting transparency. Then I compared them with what Karen had done: the shortened poll window, the ignored ramp request, the sudden budget delay. Every action she took was a direct violation. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became: Karen wasn't enforcing the rules. She was the rule, bending it to fit her image of a perfect neighborhood where people like us didn't belong. I began collecting evidence methodically, like a detective building a case. Screenshots of her emails. PDF downloads of meeting minutes. Photos of the unfinished ramp and the faded under repair sign that had been there for nearly a year. I even went to the county website and found the accessibility compliance forms, and there, in plain text, was the approval signature she had buried under paperwork. The date was 6 months old. Karen had lied not just to me, but to the entire HOA board. One evening, I drove to the community center where old meeting files were stored. The volunteer at the front desk, a quiet older man named Harold, looked up when I walked in. "You're Emily's mom, right?" he asked gently. I nodded, wary. He hesitated before leaning closer. "Karen's been running this place unchecked for years. You're not the first she's cornered. But you might be the first who's got her cornered back." He handed me a folder stamped Fiscal 2024. Inside were expense reports, the pool maintenance fund, the accessibility allocation, everything. And right there, under ramp construction, was a $5,000 expense marked paid. My pulse spiked. Paid? The ramp didn't even exist. When I got home, I spread every paper across the kitchen table. The evidence looked like a battlefield: documents, sticky notes, and coffee rings marking late nights of frustration and focus. Emily wheeled up beside me and frowned. "Mom, what's all this?" I smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's how we make things right, sweetheart." She nodded slowly, as if she didn't fully understand but trusted me anyway. That trust lit a fire in me I didn't know I still had. By midnight, the folder was complete, labeled, organized, undeniable. I even printed out the section of the State Equal Access Act that guaranteed public facility inclusion for disabled residents, highlighting it in bright yellow. Every line felt like armor. Karen had her HOA bylaws, I had the law. Tomorrow, I would take this to someone who actually enforced rules, not twisted them. And as I slid the file into my bag, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't scared of Karen anymore. For the first time, she should have been scared of me. The following week, the community meeting felt different. Word had spread that something was brewing, and for the first time, Karen didn't look entirely at ease. She stood at the front of the clubhouse in her usual bright yellow blouse, adjusting her pearls and flipping through her clipboard like she was preparing for court. I walked in with my folder under one arm and Emily beside me, her wheelchair wheels freshly cleaned and glinting under the fluorescent lights. The room fell silent. A few neighbors nodded politely, others looked away. Karen cleared her throat. "Let's keep things brief today," she said, tapping the microphone. "As always, we'll start with community updates." Her voice trembled slightly. She knew something was coming, she just didn't know when. Halfway through the meeting, I raised my hand. "Before you move on, I have something the board should see." Karen's smile tightened. "Mrs. Parker," she said smoothly, "we're not taking open comments until—" "This isn't a comment," I interrupted, standing up. My voice echoed through the room. "It's evidence." Gasps rippled as I stepped forward, handing the folder to one of the county compliance officers sitting quietly in the back. I'd invited them the night before after submitting a formal complaint through the state's accessibility hotline. They were here to observe, but when they saw the papers, their pens started moving fast. "According to HOA bylaws section 14b, I began, holding up a printout, residents are entitled to equal participation access and reasonable accommodations. Yet this board, specifically Karen Turner, shortened the voting window in violation of that rule." Murmurs filled the room. Karen forced a laugh. "This is absurd," she said, trying to sound calm. "We've always followed," "Then why," I cut in, flipping to another document, "does this record show $5,000 spent on a pool ramp that doesn't exist?" I slid the paper across the table. The inspectors exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat. "Mrs. Turner, where exactly was this payment allocated?" Karen's face flushed crimson. I'll have to review the accounts," she stammered. "Our treasurer handled that." But the treasurer, seated 2 chairs away, raised his hands helplessly. "You approved every expense, Karen." The room erupted in whispers. Someone muttered, "She's been lying." Another said, "So that's why the pool's been closed so long." Karen's facade started to crack. "This is all being blown out of proportion," she snapped, voice shaking now. "You can't just barge in here." "I can," one of the county officials said firmly, standing. "And I have authority to initiate an investigation under the Equal Access Act. Effective immediately, HOA operations are under review." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow clack. I looked around the room and saw faces I'd never seen before, neighbors who had once avoided me, now nodding, whispering, "Finally." As Emily looked up at me, I felt her small hand squeeze mine. "Did we win, Mom?" she whispered. I smiled through the lump in my throat. "Not yet, sweetheart," I said softly, eyes fixed on Karen's pale, trembling face. "But the truth finally came out, and that's the hardest part." The investigation hit faster than anyone in Maplewood could have imagined. Within a week, county officials had posted a notice on the HOA bulletin board, "Pending audit, equal access and financial review in progress." The morning it went up, Karen's golden SUV wasn't parked in its usual spot by the clubhouse. Rumor was she'd called in sick, but everyone knew she was hiding. I still went to the follow-up meeting, this time with Emily beside me again. The air inside the clubhouse felt electric, tense, humming with the quiet thrill of justice closing in. People who used to look through me were suddenly whispering about missing funds and mismanagement. When Karen finally walked in, the chatter died instantly. She looked smaller somehow, her hair less perfect, her confidence cracked at the edges. "Let's get this over with," she muttered, slamming her binder onto the table. But the county officer, Mr. Reynolds, was already waiting. He stood, adjusted his badge, and said evenly, "Mrs. Turner, we've concluded our preliminary review. Would you like to respond to the findings before we make them public?" Karen's eyes darted nervously. "Findings?" she echoed. Reynolds held up a printed sheet. Misappropriation of HOA funds. Obstruction of accessibility compliance. Violation of Equal Access Regulation Code 22B. And intentional suppression of member participation in association voting. His tone stayed calm, but the words landed like thunder. Karen's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice cracking. This is a misunderstanding." Reynolds didn't blink. "Then how do you explain the forged contractor receipts?" He handed copies across the table. "The company listed here doesn't exist, Mrs. Turner. The tax ID was fabricated." The room went completely still. Karen's breath hitched. "I didn't, someone else." She turned toward the board, desperate for support, but the same men who'd once nodded behind her clipboard now stared at the floor. One of them, Tom, spoke softly. "We trusted you, Karen. You told us it was all approved." "I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her crumble beneath the weight of her own arrogance." The same woman who once smirked at my daughter's wheelchair was now clutching her pearls like they could hold her together. "You did this," she hissed suddenly, her eyes locking on me. "You and your pity campaign. You brought outsiders into our neighborhood." I met her glare head on. "No, Karen. You brought them here. I just made sure they finally saw you for who you are." Reynolds cleared his throat again. "Mrs. Turner, effective immediately, you are suspended from all HOA duties pending full investigation. Additionally, you will be required to reimburse misused funds or face civil penalties." Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't remove me. I built this community," she shouted, but no one moved. Even her closest allies stayed quiet. Emily squeezed my hand. "Mom, can we go home now?" she whispered. I knelt beside her and said softly, almost, "Baby. Just one more thing." I turned to the microphone on the table. My voice was calm, but it carried through every corner of the room. "For years, my daughter has been told she doesn't belong. That she's an inconvenience. That she's a disruption to someone's perfect view. But today, that ends. Because this community isn't about rules, it's about people. And no rule, no vote, no clipboard should ever stand between a child and her right to be included." Applause started softly, one person, then another, then the entire room. It wasn't loud or theatrical. It was real. Karen stormed out, heels clicking furiously against the tile, but no one followed her. As the door slammed, a strange peace filled the room, like a storm finally breaking. Later that afternoon, I walked past the pool. The "under repair" sign was gone. 2 workers were measuring the concrete ramp, marking it with blue tape for construction. When Emily saw it, her face lit up brighter than the summer sky. "They're really doing it," she said. I smiled, feeling the weight lift off my chest. "They are," I whispered. A week later, Karen's house went up for sale. Her yellow blouse was never seen again at HOA meetings. The county fined her for misused funds, and a new board was elected, one that promised transparency and inclusion. On the first day the pool reopened, Emily rolled up to the gate, and this time, no one stopped her. The ramp was smooth, shining in the morning sun. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Can I go, Mom?" "Go," I said, voice breaking. "You earned it." As she splashed into the water, laughing, her joy echoed across the pool deck. I looked around and saw neighbors watching, not out of judgment this time, but out of pride. For the first time in a long while, Maplewood felt like a community again. And as I stood there, I realized justice didn't just mean Karen's downfall. It meant Emily's freedom. That was the real victory, not punishment, but restoration. The sound of her laughter was the justice no courtroom could give me. It was the sound of a door unlocking, of a rule rewritten, the sound of a child finally belonging. The days after Karen's downfall felt like waking up from a long nightmare. For the first time in months, the air in Maplewood Estates didn't feel heavy with judgment. Neighbors who once turned their backs now waved when I passed by, some even stopping to apologize. "We should have spoken up sooner," one woman said, her voice thick with guilt. I didn't hold it against them. Fear makes people small, and Karen had ruled through fear for years. But that reign was over. The new HOA board sent out a notice announcing accessibility reforms, extended voting hours, mandatory inclusion policies, and immediate repairs to community facilities. At the bottom, it read, "Special thanks to Mrs. Parker and her daughter Emily for their perseverance and courage." I read that line 3 times before it sank in. The following week, construction trucks rolled into the neighborhood, and I stood at the pool fence watching workers smooth fresh concrete where the broken ramp had once been. Emily sat beside me, her face glowing with anticipation. "It's really happening," she whispered, her eyes wide. "You did this, Mom." I smiled, brushing her cheek. "No, we did this. You made them see." When the ramp was finished, it gleamed silver in the sun, strong, welcoming, and unbreakable, just like her spirit. At the next community gathering, something strange happened. People who had once avoided us now invited Emily to join their kids in the games by the poolside. One of the dads brought her a beach ball, another mother offered her extra sunscreen. It wasn't pity anymore. It was inclusion, simple, genuine, overdue. I watched her laugh, splash, and play without hesitation. The sound of her joy filled every corner of that pool deck, washing away the bitterness that had lived there for too long. That evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the water gold, I caught our reflection in the pool, her in her daisy swimsuit, me behind her, proud and finally at peace. For the first time, I didn't see struggle. I saw victory, quiet and complete. Maplewood Estates wasn't perfect, but it was healing. And in that healing, I realized something profound: justice isn't about punishment, it's about change that lasts. The same community that once shut a gate in my daughter's face had now opened every door. And as we walked home, hand in hand, I knew the world had shifted, not just for us, but for everyone who'd ever been told no when all they wanted was a chance to belong. Sometimes, I still drive past the pool on quiet evenings, long after the laughter has faded and the lights shimmer across the water like tiny stars. The ramp glows faintly silver under the moon, a small but powerful reminder that justice can take the shape of concrete and steel. Emily calls it her bridge, and maybe she's right. It's more than just an entrance, it's a symbol of everything we fought for. That one ramp carries every late night, every tear, every time I swallowed my anger so my daughter wouldn't see how deeply it cut. Karen is gone now, her house sits empty, her name erased from the HOA directory, but her absence means more than her presence ever did. The new board sends updates about inclusion programs and neighborhood events that welcome everyone. It's as if the whole place took a breath it didn't know it was holding. I've learned that victories don't always come with parades. Sometimes, they arrive quietly, in the sound of a child's laughter echoing across a place she was once forbidden to enter. Sometimes, they come in apologies whispered too late but still sincere. And sometimes, they live in the small, ordinary moments, packing Emily's swim bag, watching her glide down that ramp without hesitation, hearing her say, "Mom, it's like I belong here now." That's the kind of justice that lasts. It doesn't roar, it heals. When people ask about what happened that summer, I tell them this: rules can protect, but only if they're made with humanity. Without it, they're just fences pretending to be structure. Karen tried to close a pole, but she couldn't close a heart. And as long as Emily's laughter fills this neighborhood, I know we've changed something bigger than just one HOA. We changed the meaning of community. We proved that belonging isn't granted by permission, it's earned by courage.